The name of this next panel is Keep Your JPEGs Off My Hashrate. This has been a very contentious issue within the Bitcoin community, I would say this year, more than a year now. And we have some of the literally heaviest hitters to talk about this subject, some of those knowledgeable people talking about this subject. So I'm really excited. Please give a round of applause for Luke Dashjr. Luke's on the way. He's coming. Luke, take a seat. Thank you for joining us. We also have Bitcoin Mechanic joining us as well. We have Alex Dashjr. I'm losing my vision. Sorry, dude, I can't pronounce your last name. We got Alex from Mega Miner. What's up, bro? Wait, what are you doing here, Tucson? That's your name? I didn't even know your real name. That's crazy. We got Sydney Bright from Abundant Minds. We got Bryce McDowell. There we go. We got Hobbyist Miner. Dude, I don't know how to do this, bro. I don't know how to pronounce anything. And then we got Matt Quinn. That's it. All right, it's all of us. I feel like, should I sit in between so there like no fight breaks out?
There should be 4 on that bench and no one on that, just
Okay.
to piss people off.
All right, so I'm gonna ask you guys, who's on the side of core and who's on the side of the knots? Obviously, Luke, that's self-explanatory. Mechanic, that's self-explanatory.
I would say I'm agnostic is where I'm at right now.
What about you? Knots.
This is a good couch. I also don't like neither. Both neither at the same time.
Okay, so I think, you know what we should do, just for the sake of this conversation? If you two gentlemen in the middle don't mind switching with this gentleman on this couch, it'd be great. For the sake of this conversation.
There you go.
All right, and I'll sit in between. All right, so we have the agnostic core/knot side on the right, and we have the knots side on the left. And for anyone who doesn't know, Luke Dash is the brains behind knots itself. So Luke, why did you feel we were having a fireside last year at Mining Disrupt, and one of the things that you told me while you were drinking your Dr. Pepper that literally never left my mind was, you said, Nico, the Bitcoin network has less than a 3% chance of survival or success. What did you mean by that?
That's assuming spam gets mitigated. We have I don't know if it's 3%, but it's certainly single-digit % chance of success, simply because too few people choose to run their own full node and use their own full node for Bitcoin.
Gotcha. We need more for full relays. These run NOS and forward reports.
I would say with the spam issue getting worse and not getting mitigated, that would take it down even lower, potentially to 0.
Mechanic, I want to get your... we got someone on stage. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So, sorry I'm late. All right. I'm the Hobbyist Miner YouTube content creator.
All right, let me ask you something. Are you on the knots side or the core side?
I traditionally navigate to the core side.
Okay, so you're all the way on that side. Perfect.
However, I have no bias, to be honest with you. As a home miner, I have no loyalty to one side or the other, to be honest with you.
So, Luke, wait, I want to ask you, what side are you on, knots or core?
I'll go with core.
Okay, then you're on that side, my friend. Yeah. All right, here we go. No, I obviously have to entertain, man. This is my job. So
I like that they're on the audience left, because it's all a very left-right divide of it, kind of.
So I do want to get Luke's response to what he just said. right? Which is this idea of like, what was it exactly?
Yeah. So as a home miner, that's my community, that's my world. And talking about like core versus notch, which is a massive debate right now amongst it. For me, I don't necessarily have a loyalty leaning one way or another as a small home miner.
I think for most people, it's not a matter of loyalty. It's a matter of what actually supports what they want to do. Core is taking away all the choices and trying to centralize policy, whereas Knots leaves it up to each individual user and miner.
How does setting a flag take away options from users?
I don't know what flag you're referring to.
It's the relay flag, right? This whole thing came from a change in the default setting that users need to change, right? That's where this whole divide came from.
Core is removing the ability for users to filter out spam. They actually wanted to remove the option entirely.
But all right, if we're just going to speak theoretically, but the idea today, from my reading of it,
not
feel
clear.
free to connect.
It's not theory. Like, you control what goes in your mempool. There are tools to do that. They either exist in the software you're using or they don't. And Knots has everything configurable, right? So you can be more spam permissive with Knots if you want. The point is, it's your computer and you get to choose what it does. That's all. So if the software doesn't have configurability as a priority and it's getting removed, it's not theoretical. Like Core, you can't really change a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I have to step back from. I'm thinking about the arbitrary limit, but you guys are talking more.
They did deprecate data carrier size too, which meant we're going to remove this as a configuration option, and that was the one compromise they made, getting rid of the deprecation comment in the documentation. That was like the one yield they made in this whole war.
So the name of this panel is Keep Your JPEGs Off My Hashrate. Mechanic, I think you're, in my opinion, the best suited to explain why we should keep your JPEGs off the hash rate.
Because Bitcoin's a monetary network, and it's only different from the other cryptocurrencies because it has this beautiful decentralization of what goes on in the rest of the network, and that comes from a vast array of nodes. No other crypto has something like that, pretty much. And the more junk you encumber them with, the less likely they are to continue doing that free service. And then the more like a crypto we become, and the more you can start changing arbitrary variables and stuff like that. The only reason 21 million is a reliable, hard enforced thing that makes it feel like gold or something is because of all these nodes. If there are only a few nodes, because nodes are run by people that, increasingly are fed up with the direction of the network and have no reason to store junk data, then you end up with centralized verification, and then things like changing the 21 million cap becomes a conversation with a small group of people, a la Ethereum, that kind of stuff, and that's the end of Bitcoin. And you don't live long in that scenario, and it's kind of like Wile E. Coyote running off the cliff and not looking down. It feels alright for a while until you realize the ground has fallen out beneath you. It's a very subtle shift in the network.
So, Luke, now that Core V30 has been rolled out, it seems like some people are using it as, their OS for their nodes. How do you feel about that?
It's a very dangerous situation that the network needs to address some way or another really quickly.
Can you elaborate about what the danger is, like specifics? Because I don't, Luke, the reason I'm saying this is because I don't think people fully understand the gravity of the situation.
The more general problem is that it kind of acts as an endorsement of spam in general, but also specifically by reclassifying it as no longer spam. It's a form of a supported use case for data storage. You now have this ability to store data and force every node to relay and store that data forever and distribute it. The chance that it makes it possible for someone to add immoral or illegal data and force everyone else that wants to use Bitcoin to distribute it for them. And in a lot of cases, the universal case that comes up is child pornography, where it's pretty much illegal everywhere. Even if it wasn't, nobody wants to participate in distributing that. So people, even if we set aside the governments, people are not going to run full nodes if it means that they will personally be involved in distributing child pornography. And that's going to, we already have a hard time getting people to run full nodes. That's going to make it pretty much impossible to get the majority to do so.
And I think that's very dangerous, right? Because at the end of the day, like, you know, part of the block size wars was all about that, right? If you increase the block, you decrease the barrier to entry for someone to run their own node at home, and therefore you get rid of the decentralization. And, you know, I think that's what sets Bitcoin apart. You want to add to that?
I think there's a number of different concerns represented here, but especially around the full blocks consideration. I mean, you've advocated in the past for a reduction of block size. Is that part of the idea? If the concern is the blocks being full, but you need full blocks to have a security budget, is the solution making the blocks smaller?
You don't need full blocks to have a security budget. I would still support making block size smaller, but the way things have gotten so bad over the last year with the Core 30 making these changes, it's kind of taken a back seat on the burner.
I think it's important to clarify that while I think most people don't want that type of material being on Bitcoin, it's not like what's happening now is suddenly making that possible. It's always been possible, right? So the core, the central matter of debate is the subject of relay filters and how that influences them going into blocks. But I think it's important for the audience that it's not like all of a sudden this is now made possible on Bitcoin. It's always possible on Bitcoin. There's no change in consensus being made.
No, this was not possible until last month when Core 30 was released.
Could you explain to me why you see it that way?
Because before Core 30, they would have to modify whatever data to make it look like something else that it really wasn't. So the blockchain would not actually store images. You'd have spam on the blockchain that is program code, financial transactions, that somebody else could take the blockchain and transform it back into an image. But that's not the same thing as the image itself being on the blockchain, which is what Core 30 has made a new part of the system.
But the actual consensus rules that would allow for someone to put an image in an op return is no different from before.
So right,
Yeah, your point is not a matter of consensus rules. This is a matter of standards, and if you have code that is code, if you have an image that's an image, what Core 30 has done is change it from abusing code to an actual supported use case, a way to actually store data such as images.
But an image is just a bunch of bytes. There was I can't claim I don't remember the name, but there's a report that was done recently where someone can embed an image, like use the data of an image and put it in an address. Like there are many ways that it's just I don't want to say it's just a database. It's just a thing of data that can be used to put that type of data on there. Like there's multiple ways of which you could cheat that.
But again, you're equating taking an image, converting it into something it's no longer an image, versus actually just storing an image as a way to actually have an image on the chain itself.
right. And before, the data was just arbitrary, and it had to be interpreted as an image in order for it to work. Now you can actually just put an image on.
Okay. So for my education then, but for like clarification to the audience, is it that, because it's my understanding that obviously there's no change in consensus, right? What is allowed to be put in a transaction has always been true, or, always with that asterisk. But it's just that the release of the filter makes that or easier to cast is. If I walked right up to a miner and said, oh, I want to make this in a block, they could do that without the filters.
But it would not be interpreted correctly as data storage. It would be spam on the network. It would not be an image.
But look, I think we got cross wires here. Your point is that 100 kilobyte op returns were always possible, regardless of if we change default policy.
Yeah.
That's the point. Yeah, reason I think this is a whataboutism style argument is because the practicalities of doing malicious attacks where you put actual harmful data that people really would, the kind of data that would make me want to turn off my node, that kind of data, putting that in an 100 kilobyte op return, your actual practical, it's consensus valid, sure, you can mine a 1 megabyte video of, you know, something really, really bad. You could put that in a block, but no miner would have done it. And if you approached a miner saying, hey, I got this 1 megabyte op return, can you put it in one of your blocks? All of them are just going to say no, because they're going to look at it and go, what is this? And why didn't you just relay it around the network like a normal transaction? Oh, it's an MP4. And this is not conjecture, right? Mara, the pool famously that went outside of the relay network and were like, we have this service called Slipstream. We'll add transactions that the network refuses to relay. And they had terms and conditions. They said no copywritten content. But copyright is pretty vanilla. I don't care if someone uploads like a picture of Aladdin or something on my node. I don't care. I'm not going to turn off my node for that. But that was still too controversial for Mara. So the kind of stuff Luke was talking about. So the Bitcoin rules allow it. You can upload a 1 megabyte pornography video in a Bitcoin block, right? It's going to be a small video, very low quality, but it's going to be enough to make people, some people disgusted and turn off their nodes. Now that it gets relayed around the network in a dumb capacity, everyone running Core 30 with the default settings, which is how most people run software, is going to start relaying stuff like that. So you now have anonymous cloud storage. And that's just inviting a problem, because there are people out there, people that want to store malware, people that want to store porn. Those people don't have any other, they don't want to store it in their own computers. They don't want to store it in the cloud because they'll keep getting kicked off. An anonymous file sharing platform where the users can't delete anything, which is unique to Bitcoin. And don't tell me about prune nodes, I really don't want to hear it. The users can't delete it, it's a gift. If I'm some guy scamming someone and I need some old lady to pull some malware from something and then run it on her computer, if it's my server she has to download it from, there's a trail there. But if I can tell her, yeah, just reach out to the Bitcoin network in block 920,000, download this op return, and here is the malware, run it locally, chop off the first few bytes. It's such a gift for people that want to do scamming and stuff like that, because none of the nodes can delete it. You have to turn off your node to not participate in that, or you have to stop it from getting in the network in the first place, which is how it always worked until Core 30. So it's like people taking this, you know, all these tropes around censorship resistance and immutability and all that, and saying, let's apply it to file storage in general. And this is insane. You guys have no idea the evil that lurks out there that Bitcoin has been totally shielded from, because all the nodes did was concern themselves with financial activity and reject everything else, and the miners respected that. That was the dynamic of Bitcoin. And so, to get back to your point, the consensus rules haven't changed. It's always been possible to stick ridiculous stuff, but it's kind of like saying HTTP allows evil, you know, communication as well. But do you go on any of the websites that would use it for that? No, of course not, because you regulate the rules of a protocol, and how people generally use them are more tightly constricted. I mean, to go even more wanky about it, you have, pardon my language, you have English. You can do some pretty nasty things with the English language, but the way you actually talk is a subset of what's possible with English. You're not going to say certain things because that makes sense. And we don't need to change the English language to forbid stuff. We just have expectations on how people generally use a protocol. Bitcoin needs to generally be used as a monetary protocol. And if we get in trouble for running Bitcoin nodes, I will fight for the freedom to use money as a person should want to use it. I'm not going to fight for the umbrella of what's possible with the protocol, which is file storage, because you get into a different section of legal ramifications. It's pressure that nodes don't want. No one wants it. It's just going to centralize the network. As people, you end up in an environment where people run nodes if they have a license to do it, because they know about all this junk that's in the chain and they need a regulatory moat around them and all that stuff. And it looks fine until you realize, wait, there's only a handful of people running nodes, just like the situation with mining where there's only a handful of people making blocks. It's centralized. It doesn't work. It just ends up back in crypto territory.
So their inspiration is very... Your charisma as a speaker is commendable. It's incredible, I have to say.
Please no. It's the point I'm making. It's not... I'm just saying stuff that's true.
All right, I just want to ask you one question. All right, so the jumping off point in all this is Core 30, right? But the name of the panel is Keep Your JPEGs Off My Hashrate, which reminds me of Ordinals, which has been a thing for the last couple of years. So maybe you could help us all understand why the flashpoint is Core 30 when JPEGs have been a thing for the last couple of years.
Because Ordinals are not Bitcoin. Ordinals are an attack on Bitcoin. The Bitcoin network does not recognize ordinals, does not recognize inscriptions.
I can also answer that. So I think it's important to put history into context, right? So, right, SegWit is segregated witness. Ordinals are using witness data today. So I do think it is important. And my whole point earlier was really just that, like a semantical one. It's not that I disagree that these things can't be a problem on the network, but it's important we clear on what we're talking about. And ordinals use witness data. The opportune is something else entirely. And so to put an image in an opportune is different from what ordinals were, because ordinals were using witness data, not the arbiter.
I think that the biggest differentiator, like, correct me if I'm wrong, is like prior majority of people trying to put these images on Bitcoin would have to go through a service like Slipstream where it can just submit it for miners to mine blocks. That's the biggest difference, right?
No, I would say the biggest difference is how it's interpreted. The blockchain, as interpreted up until last month, is only financial data. There is no way to do images as an actual supported use case. Core 30 twists that around, makes the supported use case, and now the correct way to interpret the blockchain is as an image in those cases.
May I ask you, what do you mean by the word interpreted?
All it's have to be interpreted to have any meaning at all.
Do you mean like from the social layer? People like interpreting what Bitcoin can be used for?
It's
It's more of a software layer to a large extent, but there's also a social aspect, sure.
It's what I said earlier. You can have arbitrary data that's just sitting there, but I can just choose to interpret it as anything I want. That's literally what ordinals is. Like, if I want it to be an image because it looks like an image, then I can just say that's what it is, and then your browser will just pull it up as an image, right? Like, you can have on your computer right now, you can have just like a hash that doesn't mean anything right now. But one day I can just decide that actually that hash looks like this image. And then if you look that hash up on a browser, it'll just show the image all of a sudden. So actually you had CP on your computer the whole time. Wow.
I think stepping out a little bit from the whole technical side of it, I think no one disagrees with you two when it comes down to the ethical side of things, right? We all agree. Like, I hope everybody on the panel here can agree on that. And I think that's a big one. I think where a lot of people are very uneducated or even understanding that this is even happening. Like, when I talk to a majority of my audience or just even individuals here, they're not even in the know to know that, like, this is out there and this is even occurring. And where my concern is, as someone making YouTube content and speaking with individuals, is we have pushed so hard to actually get Bitcoin to be something legitimate from an outside public perspective. You know, right? Like, because it's been viewed in such a negative, illegal manner for so long that, like, some of the things we're talking about here, can you imagine that getting to more mainstream media, that, and then them trying to interpret it, and then but explaining, oh, well, you know, all of a sudden they will flip that narrative so quickly. And just like you had said, where, like, all of a sudden you find out, like, oh, I can't run this Bitcoin node because it's illegal, because it could have, you know, child pornography and such on it. Like, it is something that, like, people don't believe is important. Like, oh, I don't really need to understand that, but you kind of do, because this is a lot of our livelihood right here.
Dude, you're on the wrong side of the couch, bro.
I just sat down and you put me here.
Also, guys, and I'm just asking you on stage, we are on YouTube, and they algorithmically will trigger words, so illicit images would be very highly appreciated. Or
Speak in the abstract.
Or the Simply Bitcoin channel is gonna go poof. Just call it cheese pizza.
Oh man, I can't eat pizza anymore.
So,
Garth?
but anyways, yeah, dude, you're on the wrong side of the couch, my friend.
Okay, so I haven't heard. I didn't even know that was your last name, dude. But I'm still gonna call you by your anon, which is Tucson. Tucson, we haven't heard from you. You've been very quiet. We're 30 minutes into the panel. Why are you on that side of the couch?
I'm on this side of the couch because I'm not convinced this is a pervasive problem. And I think the narrative is not helpful, and I'm frustrated by it. I think I just don't see the difference, you know, when a government's looking at this and they're looking at illicit pictures
why they would differentiate that from, the argument of you're storing illicit transaction data, say from like a hack like, North Koreans, because we've seen the North Koreans hack a lot of people. We have that transaction data, so technically you're storing illicit information. I see the, conversation could be carried, multiple ways. And one of the things I really struggle with, the framing of, the illicit material being this dramatic, house on fire issue is that I think it's really, destructive optically, for people that are trying to understand this technology and, don't have enough context. And that's just the thing they hear is like, oh, Bitcoin is, a database, that people are using for illicit, activity. Like, there are lots of ways, and unfortunately, like all the platforms that we use, this data is set over. Like Telegram is used for illicit materials. That the business mega miner, we do almost all of our transactions on Telegram. Instagram, Twitter. There's been lots of issues with content moderation. It's an issue with the internet, and the solutions that have been proposed for dealing with it on those platforms has been things like digital IDs, very serious censorship, which has the ability to restrict other stuff that is good, freedom of speech, and it's just one of those challenges of freedom in general, is people will abuse it. But in this specific scenario, I feel like the people that are incentivized to put these illicit materials on Bitcoin are intentionally, they're not doing it because it's efficient. They're not doing it because it's, a good way to disseminate, this material that they want to. I feel like it's an attack vector to intentionally get the state, to come in. And I just don't like the narrative. Like I understand the narrative of using Bitcoin as a monetary network. I mean, that's been my primary interest and goal of, why I've been interested in Bitcoin. And I think, one of the ways to really encourage that is by telling compelling stories, inspiring people and making this a cool technology. I feel like, this ecosystem with all the infighting has really gone away from that recently. So that's,
I would love to add to that, because I agree with the sentiment that I'm very upset of how the conversation has gone. I think it's not that I disagree at all with the intent that we are trying to get this stuff off of the network. In my opinion, I think that the more helpful mechanisms at which we would do that are not being discussed. And given that there's so much attention and emotion around this subject, I think it'd be better if we directed that, energy towards giving people who are less technical understanding more helpful advice on how I think is more helpful to, prevent that stuff from going on the network. I would also say that, there's something I like to call the Anakin effect, right? Where, you fear something so much that you try so hard to stop it that you end up causing that fear itself. And I do stress that effect. That thanks. Yeah, that same thing, right? But I think there's something like that going on here.
So it's definitely, yeah. So before I want to get Luke and Mechanic's response to that, because Tucson, you did an incredible job. You did too. I just want to hear from the audience. Like, first of all, first question: how many of you guys are running Bitcoin nodes? Raise your hand. So like, fine. It's because that's all the blue light. So it's a lot of hands, right? Okay. How many of you guys are running Core? How many of you guys are running Knots? I'm happy to see it. Okay. All right. Cool.
Can I add to it?
How many are you running full relays? So you forwarded your ports.
How many of you would be running nodes if it meant that you were distributing child?
YouTube, illicit images. Captain Picard.
So, Mechanic and Luke, I do want to give you guys an opportunity to respond to what these two gentlemen. It's an incoherent position. I don't mean to be impolite. The issue is, one of your points is that the law is essentially arbitrary anyway, so Bitcoin nodes can be doing illegal stuff if the government just decides transactions are bad now. But the point is, am I going to defend what I'm doing? And I believe that I will broadcast immoral transactions because I believe Bitcoin fundamentally needs to be fungible, and us having UTXO blacklists and things like that, it's not workable. We had Satoshi set the precedent. He's like, oh my goodness, WikiLeaks is using our platform to transact, and there's like 10 of us. We're going to get our heads blown off. We know what happened to all the people metaphorically, sorry. Before Bitcoin, everyone that tried to do something like Bitcoin ended up in jail or shut down or fined or something like that. So Satoshi he knew what he was getting into. He knew there'd be a lot of heat, and he kept himself anonymous for deliberate reasons. And but he didn't say, all right, we don't want WikiLeaks using this. I'm updating everyone's node to have a blacklist of known UTXO stuff. He was like, well, it would have been nice to get this attention in other contexts. He didn't say no, right? And he kind of set the precedent. Bitcoin needs to be neutral to work. Money needs to be fungible. But let's go to the opposite extreme and start talking about file sharing networks like IPFS and, MadeSafe and, networks like that where anyone can decentralize, recover and store files and all that. In none of those circumstances are the participants in those networks expected to store everything, because it would just paint targets on the back of the nodes in those networks. So IPFS, you can store a copy of files locally if you want, but it's not the default. In Bitcoin, you store everything. So when you get files dumped in the blockchain, you're going to have to not only store it, you have to process it to make sure it is dressed up as a valid transaction to make sure the block is valid in the first place. And you have to serve it to everyone else. So you're serving it up to other people, you're storing it, you're verifying it, and you're stuck doing that forever. So doing something like that is shoehorning this whole, all right, we have to deal with, we just want to use money and not get kicked off PayPal, so we want neutral money. You're trying to turn that into something way bigger that I'm just not up for defending is the problem. And yeah, other people might be. To be fair, I've met a bunch of people that are like, all data is just ones and zeros. I don't care what you put in an op return. I will run my node no matter what. And I'm like, sure, I respect the principle of the situation, but I know most Bitcoiners don't agree with you, and they will turn off their nodes. And you don't just need to run a node, you need other people to run nodes for Bitcoin to be decentralized. So anything that makes node running more annoying, whether it's making blocks bigger or filling up the chain with crap, is an enemy of you trying to have a decentralized Bitcoin. That is someone attacking the network from your perspective. That is the entire reason we end up in this position. And if governments want to make arbitrary things about Bitcoin illegal that I'm incapable of defending, that is much worse than them just coming after a subset of things it can do. That's all. So it's basically about, I don't want Bitcoin nodes to start. I don't want part of running a Bitcoin node to be ferrying illegal drugs around, like in my car, right? Because it's nothing to do with money. It's just going to draw heat. I don't want to defend doing it. You can argue that drugs should be legal. I will argue that, but it's not Bitcoin's fight. That's the point. I don't want.
Yeah, well, you even said that. I love what you said there, where it's like people that think it's just ones and zeros and they don't care. They don't care now. But take a step back several years ago, and all of a sudden, are we going to have, the government, everyone view Bitcoin as highly illegal because of that? If we have that mentality of, oh, it's just data, it's just ones and zeros, fine. But as a miner, all of a sudden, if it becomes illegal to mine because of that conversation, then you're going to be concerned, right? You're going to be concerned about what's on that data when it becomes illegal to do that, to run a node, to be a miner. I mean, these are all things that people need to pay attention to.
Also, there's a fundamental difference between storing illicit images, a record. There's a fundamental difference between storing a record of somebody else receiving or sending money to North Korea or whatever. Somebody else did that. You're just keeping a record of it. It's not the same thing as distributing and actually committing crimes yourself.
So I want to take it in this direction. Luke, why do you think, despite all the blowback that the core team got from the community, even the crowd, bro, like I asked the crowd, like Knott's first core, maybe the core people are ashamed that they just don't want to raise their hands,
but the knots, like clearly the people are on the side of knots, right? And why do you think the core team decided to just like basically ignore that and feel like they can do better? And then I'll add to that and say, I remember like part of the reasons Ordinals was even a thing was because of the Taproot implementation, right? And it had unintended consequences, right?
It was a bug when Taproot was activated. The spam filters that were already in place were not updated to apply to Taproot as well.
Well, that acts to my point, right? Which is like, I think we have to be very careful changing Bitcoin because there are unintended consequences of changing Bitcoin. Why do you think the core team felt like it was necessary to change, to make such a big change? And also, we're on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know the overall underlying motivations. They make up excuses, but none of them really hold water.
I have some conjecture there, but it's hard to know, like, we're doing the money simple here. I think it's because devs like other devs. Generally in the discourse, you've seen that there's a lot of people that write software and, you know, there's a lot of ivory tower kinds of things going on. I think I'll be honest, I think the Bitcoin plebs, the maxis, drive core developers absolutely nuts. They cannot stand interacting with them. All of their accounts on Twitter are marked, "We don't monitor this account. Find us on Blue Sky," or something like that. Find us on GitHub, find us on Delving Bitcoin. Anything but dealing with toxic Bitcoin maximalists on Twitter. They can't stand dealing with them. I understand why. We're very uncompromising, very annoying people. But they are the network. Whether you like it or not, people running nodes at home on a Raspberry Pi are the Bitcoin network. You don't have that in Ethereum. That's why Bitcoin's better than Ethereum. So when it comes down to it, Bitcoin has a bunch of fun things developers want to do, and they complain that Bitcoin's not a fully feature-complete programming language and it's boring. They're not hodlers trying to, you know, they're not blue-collar workers saving in Bitcoin trying to protect their purchasing power. They're developers that want to develop. And they're bored by the limitations that Bitcoin presents them with. And there are people that want to build these scammy platforms like Citria that mimic Ethereum functionality on top of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is too limiting for them, so they need to bust doors open and let it do this, that, and the other. And developers like other developers. So they're like, well, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And anyone that says you're changing things around in Bitcoin, they say, well, that was technically already possible anyway, even though in a practical sense it wasn't. Which is why that's such a frustrating argument, because we're looking at the blockchain saying, you've just changed the filter, and now you've enabled a bunch of stuff. By in reality, you know, in a practical sense, everyone was running default policies, which you just ripped out. And now that's going to have meaningful changes in how the blockchain looks. But you get to say, oh, it was technically possible anyway. And now we have this new interesting use cases. And there's a lot of people yelling at me about it on Twitter. They refuse to use my pronouns. I don't like interacting with them. It's like, who are we dealing with here? Like,
May I? Sorry, may I respond to that?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
Again, I'm on this side just to buy some balance. It's not like I fundamentally disagree with the defensive response you two have. But I will say I find that to be, again, from an educational point of view, not the most objective way of looking at things. Again, I think what other people are really saying, I find it to be a very small minority of people who actually want that type of activity on Bitcoin. I think the vast majority of people just want Bitcoin to be money. The question isn't about whether or not it should or shouldn't be allowed on Bitcoin. The question is, how do you prevent it? And again, this is still why I find this subject to be a little frustrating, because again, no one, not no one, a very small amount of people actually want this to be happening. Just everyone else is arguing there are other things that can be done to promote those things from not happening, such as, you know, decentralized mining, which is what Ocean's about, or, you know, using economic filters and people actually spending their Bitcoin. There are other things that would help prevent this from going on the network, but this conversation is being pigeonholed to one particular way of thinking about it, and I think that does a disservice to everyone listening to us.
Decentralized mining only helps if miners have the options to filter things out.
And I think it's awesome that you created a way for them to filter it, but we don't have decentralized mining, and to me that's a more important fight.
well, I think I appreciate the shout out there because it is an Ocean thing. you have to look at how we got to where we got. So it started, I think I'll invoke Matt Hill from Start9. Disclaimer, I used to work there, but I don't anymore. It's a great product. So if you want to run a node at home, Start9 is a good way to do it. Matt Hill is the CEO of Start9, and his contention that I didn't believe at the start of all this, but he's shown to be right, was let people filter out junk data that they don't want to relay around the network. And if you don't let them, forks will start happening. And I was like, no way is this going to manifest in a fork. And now that pretty much looks like it's what's happening. So you give someone, you give someone a gun because you don't want them to drop a nuke. And that's kind of the analogy. And the nuclear option is now on the table. And I don't know, I expected to see a big drop in NOTs nodes when the fork started being talked about, and that didn't happen. So if we go naively looking at the numbers, 1 in every 5 Bitcoiners out there is all right with a fork already. Maybe. I don't know. Like, people can argue in either direction. We know those numbers are kind of hard to... Bitcoin doesn't have official stats. It's not that kind of project. So...
4G is not nuclear in any respect, though. Bitcoin just does forks for simple upgrades. Using it for a hotfix like this is really no big deal.
I agree, but it feels like a very, very big thing to do. I mean, if the fact that it's being talked about in a temporary capacity kind of gets rid of a lot of concerns, but changing consensus rules more generally is scary for Bitcoiners.
So, regarding the fork, which I think we haven't really come to, whenever I mentioned it to casual crypto people aren't even aware that this is happening, and we're at a mining conference, and that whole I'll share why I'm on the core side is because I don't really believe that the way that things are being followed will have any chance at success. I think it's a very noble effort, and I respect the work you guys are doing a lot, but that governance challenge just seems incredibly hard. And for miners will mine on what they think other miners will mine, and nodes will accept. And that just seems like a really hard space to get gravity around, especially when the majority of people don't even know this is happening. So I don't know. How do you guys think about that?
Well, also, too, to jump in real quick there on the miner side of things, miners are just mining and chasing profitability. And so if you're a traditional miner that isn't as embedded or has the understanding, education, background, and knowledge, they're not concerned. They're really looking at chasing that profitability. And from an outside perspective, not even involving core or knots with it, miners are looking at there's more on, not that I agree, there's more going on here. The transaction fees are higher. I'm making more money. They love it. Unfortunately, they don't know the inner workings of what's happening on the backside. So I think miners traditionally are the traditional miner totally outside of this, doesn't even understand it. Doesn't even know what's happening.
Tucson, I hear you thinking from here, bro. Please voice your thoughts.
Yeah, one thing I really dislike about this discussion in general, not just this panel, but is the framing of it. There's something there's a left or right divide. I was interested in Bitcoin initially because I was politically homeless. The people in politics didn't represent me. I saw things around me in our culture and society that I thought were destructive, and most of the discussions that I saw happening were not addressing the issues, which, largely are exasperated or impacted by the money being broken. And Bitcoin was an interesting escape for me. And in this discussion, I'm not on the core or the NOTs side, because I don't see, core is a lot of different people interacting. It's a way to have a discussion around the development process. It's not a monolith. And there's individuals at core on the core team that I, respect more than I respect others, but it's not my team. But I feel like there's an effort to kind of pigeonhole me into this, or people in general in this position of you have to choose a side. You're either, pro illicit materials or you're anti-illicit materials. And I think there's a lot of nuance to this discussion and just to Bitcoin in general that is important. I don't think that, part of the reason why, I'm agnostic is I think that Bitcoin is not going to die as a result of Core 30. I think people are going to still be able to run nodes. I think the technology like data storage and computing power continuously gets cheaper. And I just do not see it as this house is on fire situation, though I would prefer that Bitcoin be used primarily for monetary stuff. And, you know, I've never traded an ordinal, or I guess I've mined it, you know, with the pools that I've used. But, yeah, I think the narratives that get me excited about Bitcoin are around people experiencing freedom. And, you know, I'm comfortable with being politically homeless, you know, in this debate and in general, because I always have. And I just don't think the fork is going to be successful, is one thing that, you know, when I talk to miners and I get perspective from a lot of people in the industry that pull a lot of weight, it seems inconsequential to them, and it's very loud on Twitter. And I'm not saying it's not an important issue. I just don't see, you know, the direction that things are going that is going to be successful, which is kind of why I've taken the stance of like, okay, well, what's the step forward? I think it's to encourage people to use Bitcoin as money and show them how to do it, show them how they can experience freedom. You know, by using this technology, they can really insulate themselves from the awful money printing that we're seeing, the economic destruction from central planning.
Mechanic, to be specific, it was Bitcoin is not going to fail with the core V30 implementation. What's your response to that? Well, the price of freedom, which is what you rounded off with there, is eternal vigilance. And people can become complacent and take those things for granted. And the trend ultimately is what matters here. And there's a constant need to characterize this as kind of an irrelevant battle, and Bitcoin will be fine. The problem with that is you get boiled frogs. And you end up in situations where it's like, look, I don't know what happened to Bitcoin. It just kind of sucks now. Everyone that's working in the developer aspect of it's doing, you know, AMMs and junk like that ended up in all of the cryptos that just, we know what they are. They're noise, they're pump and dump scams. Bitcoin has something unique about it, and it has this irrational, paranoid, prepper type mentality that kind of keeps the spirit of it. And people can dismiss stuff like that, but the problem with dismissing stuff like that is it doesn't manifest as stuff dying immediately. Core 30 doesn't kill Bitcoin immediately. It just ends with, well, a straw broke the camel's back, and now Bitcoin kind of sucks, and everyone chooses a different point over the last 5 years of when it just started going downhill. So it becomes a trend thing. Who's running a node? Well, less people versus the overall number of Bitcoins. So I think it just comes down to that you have to, everyone has their own point where they go, well, this is too far. We're obviously in the wrong direction. Core 30 was a massive shelling point for people. Like, we started this before Core 30. We spent 2 years yelling into the void with 1% of the network running nodes. And we're utterly insane to most people. Suddenly Core 30 happens, and suddenly it's 20% of people instead of 1% of people, because a lot of people were like, that's enough. I've had enough of this. There's way too much mission creep in Bitcoin. We're being pushed in a direction that ultimately is going to end up and have us in a bad place. And you might have something later that kicks you out of the complacency where you're like, all right, I'm not tolerating this anymore. And everyone has different points. But the problem is there's never like a, haha, like the CIA now runs Bitcoin Core. You don't get things like that. It's the zombie movie fallacy, right? You end up in a police state where you just can't do anything anymore. And how did they get you there? With one little infraction after another. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's how you end up with things being degraded slowly over time. And the reason they do stuff like that, who is they, I don't know, is because they know they don't want to trigger a revolution overnight by doing something over the top. Right? They almost did it with COVID. Canada, they went too far. The trucker rally happened, and then they had to back off, and Canada had to drop all the restrictions. They can't get hysterical like that. They have to slowly mission creep it. And what's going on with Bitcoin is that. And what's so annoying about that is every time you stand up against it, people say, oh, it's not that different. Like, what difference does it really make? You've been kind of able to do it before. And I'm like, right. That's the problem, is because I'm going to look like a hysterical hypochondriac every time I make a point here. And then in 5 years, you're going to be like, what happened? I'm like, I've been trying to tell you. Slowly but surely, they've been making it worse. And yeah, I'll leave it at.
It's the trio with like a boogeyman. Like,
I feel like it was something like stacks. Like people have been able to do this Bitcoin DeFi for years, and nobody wants to do it. So I just wonder if Citria is ultimately a boogeyman, does that change anything about the math of all this?
It doesn't change the side effects, which are worse. But I'm hearing a lot of pessimism from that side of the stage, not actual conceptual problems with fork. And I want to point out that this is now 3 months before the proposed fork would even happen. 3 months, actually 2 months before BIF 148 activated. People were still calling me crazy. Developers were saying there's no way this is going to work. And it worked perfectly. So there is no real reason to suspect that this is going to be any worse.
Mechanic, I have to say, I think that point was really well done. I see what you're saying there, and I think that's really good. By no means do I mean to give pessimism for the soft fork. I'm still thinking about that myself. But I think what I'm trying to suggest is that I think that the move from 1% to 20% not the runners is highly significant to the idea that, you know, most people who are attentive to what's going on agree with the sentiment here, and that energy should be directed towards fuel for them to do what would be. There are multiple ways of helping prevent this from happening, but only focusing on software development is not the only way at which this is solved. And if that energy can be pointed to those things like decentralized mining and spending more Bitcoin, those things would also help. And that's, I don't mean to be pessimistic. It's just that that's what, again, this conversation is so one-sided when there's so many things that we could be directing people to do.
There are a lot of people that have started mining as a result of this, but the whole core side, so to speak, they are not doing anything to try to address the problem. They are just making it easier to create these problems. It's not like one way or the other way to solve it. They're not doing anything to try to solve it.
Yeah, and I just want to say really quick also, nobody's forcing anyone to make a choice. Core is just making what's arguably a very big change, and we just disagree with it.
When I was talking about that, I was talking about the language of, saying like you either filter or you broadcast illicit material. I feel like that's a very polarizing statement that I don't think fully encapsulates, the situation that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to be tribal. That was another thing you said I wanted to... It's a feature, not a bug. It's a decentralized network. People are going to throw stuff at each other and yell. It's going to become toxic. I've contributed to that a lot. I try and be, the adult in the room, but...
We're all human.
Everyone is scamming everyone else. Everyone else is calling everyone a P word at this point. Like, it sucks, but it's a feature, not a bug. It's messy. I don't really people do try and tone police it and come in and be like, right, I want everyone to be nice to everyone else. It's just not gonna happen. Right there.
Luke, I for the mechanic answer, but I want you to answer Tucson's question, which is, he doesn't believe that Core V30 is going to be the death of Bitcoin. Everything's going to be fine. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's an assertion that just completely ignores the actual nature of the problem that we're dealing with here. The fact is that this attack is going on, that could get worse any day now, and just wishing it couldn't doesn't make it go away.
Could you describe how it could get worse so that people understand?
A government puts illicit material on the chain, and that's, if we don't do something right then and there, it's called irreversible.
To be honest, the Streisand effect keeps getting mentioned, and I don't really want to lay out the attack for them. I can think of like a 3-step process whereby you can do some targeted prosecution of high-profile Bitcoiners. But I don't really want to, every time I lay out the attack, people go, well, it's your fault when it happened then. And Peter Todd and Adam Back both keep doing that to me, saying, Streisand effect, no one would have thought of this if you hadn't brought it up. Even though BSV got filled up with this kind of, content the minute they did 100 kilobyte op returns. So in my opinion, this is not our fault for bringing it up. But anyway.
It only Streisand effect applies because, as you mentioned, they've already tested this attack out on BSV. That was almost certainly a trial for what's going on now. There's so many similarities. It seems pretty sure then that when Core 30 adoption rose to the point where they can say the Bitcoin network has adopted this change, they're going to put something illicit on there, and you won't even know that it's because of the blockchain when people start getting selectively prosecuted. These records are all sealed because of the nature of the content. All you're going to know is this person got convicted of having the illicit material, and that's all there is. You won't even know that it's Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's like, well, who runs a Tor exit node? You just know that some people did, and they ended up having their lives ruined over it. I don't want that kind of trauma for running a Bitcoin node.
There's no reason to risk it.
Supposed to be one. This is
Tucson?
supposed to end. The
Last words?
I want to.
And the fourth thing is back, literally.
I do want to say this discussion has been really interesting. The discussion around filters a lot in general. It's caused me to learn a lot more about Bitcoin, so I appreciate you guys for that. I don't like the BSV argument because BSV is completely different than Bitcoin in the sense that it, you know, when a lot of the illicit material was being put on there, there was no block size limit. The fees were incredibly low because there was no economic activity on it and it wasn't valuable. Like I think to run an attack on Bitcoin in the way that it's being described, it's going to be very expensive, and it's not because people are doing it to disseminate the information. They're doing it to attack Bitcoin, you know, to feed into these narratives is the way that I see it. So, I mean, yes, that's a possible attack, but I feel like we're, you know, in the way this conversation is having, we're kind of setting them up, you know, for that being, you know, a way to go after node runners because the narrative has already been set. That this is a thing, and instead of pointing at them and saying, hey, you guys are bad actors trying to attack this, and, you know, I don't know who are the people wealthy enough to, you know, inscribe a ton of, you know, illicit material in there to the point where it brings enough attention from nation states.
I mean, it's not very expensive. The L1 transaction fees are historical lows.
But was it a coincidence that Core 30 also decimated the transaction fee minimum to a tenth of what it used to be?
But what's the threshold of where this gets nation state? Is it 1 or is it?
Just 1 is enough to cause these problems. And it's going to probably be the nation state that puts it in there in the first place.
All right, gentlemen, we're getting to the top, so I do want to give each one of you guys 1 minute each, starting with Luke. Luke, the final words to the audience. The name of the panel is Keep Your JPEGs Off My Hashrate.
We spend a lot of time on the illicit material topic, but I do want to point out that spam it broadly, even before all the illicit material, is still a problem and still a threat to the network that needs to be mitigated.
Tucson.
Appreciate everybody up here. I think these conversations are interesting. I think it's important to try and learn about Bitcoin, think critically about these things, not take tribal sides, and yeah, appreciate the different perspectives, even if I disagree with them.
Mechanic. Yeah, I think miners are invested in the Bitcoin ecosystem more than plenty of other people in the space, right? You're not running an exchange or something like that. Then you care about the health of the overall ecosystem. And there aren't a lot of people in the world that just want to store other people's files for free. So the more of that stuff you put in the blockchain, the more they're likely they are to turn off the node. And you're doing an unbelievable amount of burning of electricity to find a block to satisfy a requirement placed on you by a bunch of nodes. The fewer of them there are, the more you're wasting your time. And that's a very abstract way of saying you're killing the value of the thing you're invested in by filling it up with junk. So don't do it.
Fellow content creator, Hobbyist Miner.
Yes, you made a really good point earlier talking about tribalism, and like this is very much one of those states where people that just put their head in the sand don't want to change anything, when they're tribalists to the original way it was designed. Unfortunately for that, I think, as these guys are definitely talking about down below over here, change has to occur in order to keep moving forward.
Boost.
Right.
If I could wax
can't read that, sorry.
Oh, yeah. If I could wax philosophical for a minute, in my mind, the Federal Reserve is the biggest problem on the planet. And I feel like...
Give a round of applause to that.
I feel like we should all know that at this point. I don't know if it needs clapping. But if you start at that premise, then I can't see JPEGs being on the blockchain as anything other than an adversary to Bitcoin, right? Because I would need to use Bitcoin as a monetary network if I want to crush the Fed, or at least it's the best tool right now, right? So I don't see how it's a debate. Like, keep them off there.
Yeah, I think that this side of the stage deserves a lot of respect. And I think if you agree with them and you want to keep Bitcoin safe, then I would recommend beyond just running a node, you should do two things. You should mine your own blocks. Don't just be a hasher. So either, get a BitAxe and solo mine, or go with the host and mine with Ocean and Datum. And I also think you should spend your Bitcoin more. If you're not spending Bitcoin, then you're overexposed to the dollar, and we should increase the activity of the network in that regard.
Matt, you got the final say, my friend.
Bitcoin is a consensus system. Bitcoin, by its nature, is an economic system, whether that's financial data or not. JPEGs are a use of that economic system. Has driven a security budget, which long-term with Bitcoin is a very important thing. No one wants bullshit on the chain outside of probably a small faction in the world. And whatever we do about that is a very hard problem, which I respect these guys a lot for working on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Keep Your JPEGs Off My Hashrate. Please give a hand of applause to these awesome panelists. Guys, we have fantastic content coming up for you guys. This is day one of Mining Disrupt, first year in Irving, Texas. Mining Disrupt Summit. It's currently being live streamed to thousands, so enjoy the expo, enjoy the food. And again, we have some incredible content lined up for you guys coming soon. So stay tuned, stay humble, stack sats, stay solvent, stay free. We'll be right back.